Again, welcome and welcome back, everyone. It is time for our alumni panel discussion. We often talk about sanctuary as if we're handed a clean plot of land and a fresh set of blueprints. And sometimes our ministry is new construction. But as everyone in this room knows, the reality of building sacred space can be much more like urban renewal. Building on top of old systems, old hurts, or old expectations. Before we can lay a single brick of peace or safety, there is foundational or excavational work to do. Tonight's alumni panelists have done everything from drawing their own blueprints to constructing never imagined ministries, as well as the difficult but transformational work of renewing and reimagining existing ministries. I'm delighted tonight to welcome our 2025-2026 Alum of the Year, Reverend Dr. Rogelio Ovalle, Reverend Dr. Allison Tanner, and Reverend Shavon Walker to talk with us about the work of creating the kinds of safe spaces where people experience the deep and wondrous love of God through human kindness and dignity, public witness and solidarity, creative vision, and possibility. I'm not going to give them long introductions this evening. If you want to know more about them, there are bios on the website for this event. But I'll just briefly say again that Reverend Dr. Rogelio Ovalle is our Alum of the Year this year, and he's a 2002 graduate of BST. Reverend Dr. Allison Tanner is pastor, educator, and organizer in the area and does a variety of work. Reverend Shavon Walker does work with the denomination and in Oakland and in spaces that some of us can't even imagine or understand. And we hope she's going to share more about that tonight. So these are our three panelists. A big welcome again to Rogelio, Allison, and Shavon. We're so glad you were willing to put yourselves out there and engage all of us this evening in this conversation around building sanctuary. We hope this will be an organic conversation that develops among the four of us, as well as all of you that have come to participate and to witness. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to what I'm going to encourage the panelists to do is perhaps I'll address a question to one of you in particular, and I encourage you and invite you to share your thoughts, and then to invite one of the other panelists to follow you, or perhaps to comment on someone else's answer. So we're going to start with kind of how you all define and translate the idea or the concept of holy ground into something that's tangible or physical or a social reality. So in your professional ministry or in the work you do in the community or in the church, how are you translating that theological concept of holy ground into something that's real? Rogelio, I'm going to invite you first.
Sure. Um, I want to share a quote from Bell Hooks, and it is intimate relationship can provide a sanctuary from the world of facades, a sacred space where we can be ourselves as we are. This kind of unmasking, speaking our truth, sharing our inner struggles, and revealing our truth. And revealing also our raw edges. This is sacred activity which allows two souls to meet and touch more deeply.
Wow.
Last month, by invitation of Councilman Sanderson, Minneapolis Councilman Sanderson, and the NAACP in Minneapolis, I was invited to collaborate and to also pray at
Mm,
the sites where George Floyd lost his life, Renee Good lost her life, and Alex Preddy lost his life.
mm,
I remember that the first site that they took me to was Alex Preddy's site where he lost his life. And I was so moved by that moment that once I got out of the car, I was, the emotion was so real that I cried. And here I'm supposed to go speak in front of people and pray in front of people, but I was moved by that moment. Dr. Elizabeth Conda Frazier, a Puerto Rican theologian, she wrote, "Anger and tears create the space for the work of the Spirit. They are the groaning of the Spirit for renewal, for creation, and expression of compassion, thus revealing a deep spiritual well." So, sanctuary for me is very practical.
mm,
You talked about our designs that we often operate in, these systems that we often operate in. Um, and for me, while I appreciate the system, and I was a bishop with the Assemblies of God, and I served national, on the national board, I think for me, that was never sanctuary.
mm,
It was the busyness of an institution. And my sanctuary was doing the practical work, has always been the practical work. So I borrow a phrase from Dr. Elizabeth Conda Frazier, and this is the first time that I heard this expression, and since then I've used it. I was talking about a young lady who came into our ministry, and she had a history that was very broken. And then
mm,
after I ministered, Dr. Elizabeth Conda Frazier talked to her students and said, "This is barrio theology." And I think for me, sanctuary is doing that kind of work, just being with people and acknowledging their brokenness and then also feeling broken because of that and then
mm.
renewed.
Yeah. Wow.
I could
It's really
keep going.
powerful.
I
Well,
could keep going, but
A-
I'd love to hear from the others.
Allison or Shavon, how would you define or translate holy ground in the spaces where you serve and live and minister?
Um, so in my ministry as pastor of public witness, one of my main responsibilities is to go into places where great pain is being experienced, great harm is being endured, and to bear witness to that pain.
Mm,
And again and again and again, as I've done that, the spaces that I go into, and I'm often going into them in an interfaith community, um, they actually become holy ground. I've just been amazed how I can go outside the San Francisco ICE headquarters with an interfaith community, and that and the main presenters, the main proclaimers are people who've been directly harmed, sharing their stories. And we have
yeah,
formed holy ground, or I can worship with Palestinian Christians in Bethlehem. And even as they're describing the horrific conditions in which they live, as they're doing that, we are together on holy ground, or outside ICE detention centers, outside ICE courthouses, and you talk about translating the concept of holy ground into tangible ways, but in many ways, simply acknowledging the holy ground and the holy struggle that people are engaged in to seek human dignity. Those spaces become transformed and holy spaces, and to be able to participate in that and experience that has been a gift, even as it's a calling that I'm living out. So I think
Mm,
I'll stop there.
love that. There's something very holy about being seen,
And
and
being able
also
to
the
see.
privilege of seeing and witnessing another.
And that I,
Yeah,
in Luke 4, when the Spirit of the Lord is upon Jesus to proclaim good news to the poor, to release of the captives and let the oppressed go free, he also claims to give sight to the blind.
right.
And in so many ways, people of privilege are blinded
That's
to the
right.
pain all around us. And so to be able to see that is liberative as well.
Mm, thank you. Siobhan, I see you thinking.
Yeah, in fact, my camera's being weird, sorry. In fact, Allison just kind of gave me a segue of sorts. Um, for me, when I am on Twitch, everyone has sort of their own, for lack of a better description, vibe. And my vibe is you're at my house, we're in the kitchen, I'm cooking, and we're talking. A lot of us were able to grow up in that kind of environment where you could hang out in the kitchen with grandma or auntie or mom or whoever, and you would have these conversations that you would not necessarily have at the dining room table while you were eating, while you were rushing on your way to, get to school or whatever. And to me, that is holy ground. That is a place where you can ask questions, where you can be accepted or safe or recognized for who you are. And that's kind of what I try to do. In my kitchen, in Jane's kitchen, you can ask questions about faith. You are accepted and safe and recognized for who you are. Doesn't matter if you're a believer, doesn't matter if you're a Christian, doesn't matter if you're an atheist. Come ask me questions. I will answer to the best of my ability. A lot of the folks that come to me have been hurt by the church in some way, shape, or form. But, in seminary, I learned that the church is also a hospital. It's more than just a dragnet. It's a place for people to go and be healed. And if I can heal people by just allowing them to speak and by bouncing things off them, telling them what it means to be American Baptist, and a lot of folks, their minds were blown by this concept, um, then that's what I can do. That is my effort to create this holy ground that people think can come in and feel safe. So,
Love that. Don't mute yourself yet because I'm going to prompt you to follow up a little bit because I'm just guessing that there may be some people in the Zoom room tonight that don't know Twitch, that need a little more information about what you're talking about. And so I'm going to ask you to talk about that. They can imagine, Allie talking about outside of ice court. They can imagine barrio ministry as Rogelio talks about it, or being at sacred places in Minneapolis because we've seen the news and things like that. But there may be some people going, "What is this Twitch that she's
so
talking about?"
Twitch is yet another social media platform. And I like to describe it as YouTube meets Zoom. So just as we are in this space and we are talking and folks are free to enter things into chat, Twitch is the same thing. So as I'm talking, people can ask questions through chat and I respond to them in real time. So it's very much like YouTube in that you can find just about anything on Twitch. It's mostly known for gaming, but there's food and drink Twitch, which is where I am. There's crochet Twitch. There's woodcraft Twitch. There's performance Twitch where you can hear people singing and playing instruments. And there's a young lady that I know who plays an electric violin. Just she is very off the cuff. You give her a song and she'll start doing some sort of harmony to it on her violin, and it's incredible. There is an older woman that I know who is in her 70s, maybe 80s, who has multiple sclerosis. And she realized that playing video games is the best way to keep her mind and hands sharp. You have not lived until you have seen this woman do a heist in Grand Theft Auto with her friends. They call themselves the Vintage Gamers. And she goes by that grandma, and it is a fabulous experience. So yeah, so that's basically what Twitch is. It's so much
So,
fun, and there's a whole community around it too.
okay, so Chiffon is you're talking about cooking live in front of people. You're doing um, kitchen counter theology and talking to people while you cook and
Hmm.
interacting. I love this. See, for many of us in this room, I think this is something we'd never thought about. So thank you for helping us see in different ways how ministry can be creative. So you all have these amazing and different kinds of ministry service. And I'm really curious how your idea of sanctuary or ministry or witness, how have those things evolved as you actually, you know, started doing the work? How is your idea of those concepts, that actual practical reality? Rogelio wants to make sure we remember that it's practical, and I love that. How's that changed since you were in seminary and began to dream or imagine about what a life in ministry would look like?
When I arrived at ABSW, now BST, uh, and I need to make a note, my son is now a student there.
Yes, he is. We're so
And
proud.
yes, he left his career in Hollywood and now he's at BST. So I'm absolutely thrilled with that. Um, so I came in to BST already. I was a young pastor. Um, I had at least 15 years of experience. So I
Mm,
came in, I think I was around 35 years old. Um, but my theology was learned in a vacuum. I grew up
ah,
Catholic. I was an altar boy. I was one of those guys that was very mischievous. Before the father would finish his prayer, I was already ringing the bell. So I often had those looks back at me. Then I came into relationship with Christ through the witness of an uh, an ex-drug addict.
mm,
So from there, just this Pentecostal experience. Um, and I think I had struggles with some of the stuff that I was uh, learning, appreciative of the community, absolutely. But there were some things that just didn't sit well with me. Um, and so my my experience there was an evolution. And I took Dr. Leon Flesher's class, and I think my son now has her as a professor. It was the book of Job, and the text that we used was Gustavo Gutierrez. And I remember
mm,
just going through that book and just reading some of the concepts as to the relationship the church should have with uh, the marginalized. That resonated with me. So it's been a journey, and I think it allowed me to appreciate the holiness theology that I learned in Pentecostalism, but it also bridged this conviction that there was more. There was more than just um, this character and that there was a call to be a servant to
Mm.
others. I watch what Allison does. I love Allison Palestine. Uh, Being in front of ICE headquarters, arm in arm. She's not Mexican. She's not Palestinian in terms of what her DNA is, but her spiritual DNA. She's 100% Mexicana. She's 100% Palestinian. And I think that's what this does. It makes you aware there's something deeper.
Mm, that's really beautiful. Allie or Siobhan, how have you experienced that kind of evolution in your own life and ministry?
For me, I would say, okay, one of the rules on Twitch is if you have trolls, people who come in solely to start trouble, do not engage in any way, shape, or form. Just block them or time them out, move on. However, for me, if I have trolls who come in with homophobic comments or anti-LGBT, especially if they try to use scripture to justify those beliefs, um, that's my specialty. So the first time I ever engaged a troll like that, the whole conversation, my mods, my moderators were like, "Oh no, we know that you don't normally stand for trolls. Say the word, blink twice, we will ban this person immediately." And I said, "No, let them speak." Because I want this to be a conversation and I want people to understand that they don't have to stand for this. Here is stuff, here are things that they can say in response. Here is um, a biblical exegesis of how to respond to these kind of attacks. And 30 minutes later, the guy got tired and left. So I think I taught my audience a lot that day. And for me, that was how um, I evolved. I'm like, okay, I don't necessarily just have to block you. If I engage you and I can make you go away, by refuting everything you've said, not only do you not want to come back here, there will be more people that will want to join me because other people are going to tell them what I just did. And that is exactly what happened.
Mm.
So I have grown a lot since then.
So I've been thinking a lot about this question since since I first named it, because my ministry began kind of in traditional church, and my work of creating sanctuary really was focused on providing for the physical and the spiritual needs of my church community, those who would
Yeah.
come into the church. But then as my church really made a commitment to become a sanctuary congregation, in many ways, our sanctuary work was extending this commitment of well-being far beyond the walls of the church in the community, and finding places that needed this holy space. Um, and then at my ministry now trying to encourage churches to be apartheid-free churches, and trying to work to end complicity with the ways in which our government and, quite frankly, our church have been co-opted to support Israel as they're persecuting Palestinians. I realized that this piece of sanctuary work is actually ensuring that our own gathering spaces don't cause harm to others. It's a way of saying, if we have this sanctuary to tend to the needs of our community, that we can still be complicit in larger structures of injustice and have to actively work to partner so that our sanctuary, our safe space, isn't causing harm to others unknowingly.
Mm. That's another layer that many of us haven't even haven't thought about. It's really, really something, Allie. I'll be thinking about that for a while. Thank you for that. One of the things, an image came to my mind as you were talking, and I think it leads us in a way that we'd like to go in this conversation. And you said when your church made the intentional decision to be a sanctuary community, then all of a sudden, that took them from, inside a physical sanctuary, the place that we would name the sanctuary, out, right? And I have this vision of like blowing the doors off, right? We decide we're going to be sanctuary, and suddenly the doors blow off of this space that we have named, this confined sort of space. And it becomes something so much bigger. And so much more expansive, so much more inclusive. So one of the things we talked about as we were preparing to chat tonight was how intentionally creating safe spaces like these, whether they're in the barrio or in Oakland or in Bethlehem or in a virtual space like Twitch that we never dreamed about, that and Shavon alluded to this a little bit too. Often it requires us to make difficult choices. I think Rogelio actually alluded to it earlier in another response of his. So I'm going to offer you two choices. I'm mindful of the time, and I know I heard from Melissa. We've got some questions in the chat. So two options. One, what's a specific kind of structural choice or collaborative effort you've made that was absolutely essential to make your space or your ministry inclusive and sustainable? Alternately, and maybe on a related note, maybe tell us about a time when that tough choice meant like just demolishing what was already there, whether it was, a structure, a denomination, an institution, so that something new could emerge and be built. So, can you all speak to that? Those tough choices that sometimes have to be made in order for life-giving ministry and space to emerge?
Yeah, I'll start off. I think the tough choice. I just started at ABSW, BST, and that was around the time that Gwen Arahu was murdered, a trans person murdered in Fremont, and it gained national attention because of how horrific that murder was. And I was involved in creating, because I felt convicted about that, uh, a march to bring attention to the trans community and how horrific violence in the trans community is. Violence of any kind is horrific. And I remember walking, because I got called into the principal's office, and my leadership at the time, they told me that I could not be involved in those kind of um,
Wow.
protests. And I took out my card, my minister's card of ordination, and I put it on the table and I slid it over to the then bishop, and I told him, well, I guess this will end my relationship here.
Mm.
They didn't take my card, and I ended up being the bishop years down the road. But it was a choice that I had to make. I want to jump off of what Shavon said. We get these trolls, right? And in the holiness tradition, I'm just impressed with the sainthood of all the saints, right? Uh, and how it's easy to make judgments. Um, and So people often come on my social media and say, well, are you a preacher, a pastor, or a politician? And my response is, I'm a person of faith committed to honoring biblical mandate.
Wow.
And I think that's what we are and who we are. Um, I last year I preached on a series on the theology of Bad Bunny, and I'm half Puerto Rican, so I love that. Um, and I don't think I could have done that safely had I continued ordination in the Assemblies of God. And that's going to lead me to
Mm,
the next uh, question. Um, so after serving the national level, after serving 35 plus years with the Assemblies of God as an ordained minister, I made a decision. I have relationships with the African American community, Church of God in Christ, Mennonite, American Baptist, et cetera, et cetera. And I made a decision that I was no longer comfortable with the rigidity of
mm,
conservatism. And so I no longer have a credential with the Assemblies of God. Um, so that allows me this freedom to operate in different circles, um, and to live out my faith with conviction, knowing that my decisions are for and will always be for humanity,
mm,
whether it's in Palestine, whether it's in Mexico, whether it's in front of the ICE headquarters, Allison, or if it's um, being at the sites where George Floyd lost his life and said, I can't breathe, or Renee Good, uh, logistically being there, it's a different picture.
mhm,
That gentleman, he intentionally walked in front of her, had all this space that he could have operated from that, but that was a very intentional uh, act. And then Alex Preddy. And I think demolishing those structural systems in my own life so I can have the freedom to say, thus saith the Lord to
mm.
all people. I think that's been liberating and freedom for me. Um, I pastor a church of 40 people. I've got two in my congregation facing homicides. Um, one kid, 17 years old. I got addicts that walk into my congregation. I don't want to fit in. I just want to be. And wherever that is, um, I think that's important. That sometimes we do need to walk away from those systems so we can be free to do whatever God has called us to do. I'm sorry. Don't want to preach.
Thank you, Rogelio.
Yes.
No, you've inspired us all. It's not, those hard choices they're hard to make for a reason because they come at a cost. Thank you for sharing with us because that's also hard to share those kinds of experiences. Allie, Shavon, tough choices you had to make, and then we are going to pivot to questions from the chat.
Well, I want to expand on what Rogelio said. Much of what he said resonated with me, um, but it's not just about allowing our individual calling to transform us and maybe move us beyond the church. In my case, the congregation was able to make structural changes to create a position, pastor of public witness, so that within their very structure, within their budget, they would have a leader focused not just on the needs of the congregation, but on the needs of the community and on getting the congregation out into the community, getting the needs of the community into the congregation. So for me, as my calling expanded, and I thought that would take me from the church actually said, no, we see this changing and we want to continue to journey with you. We want you to continue to be our pastoral leader in this work you are doing. And it meant I went down to halftime, talk about crumbling crumbling job possibilities. But in my church, making this commitment, and in my church prioritizing this shifting of ministry, the entire church has been able to be on this journey with me.
Mm,
That has been transformative of who the church is, of how we show up, of how we understand ourselves. Yeah, I encourage you to think not just individually, but how can congregations uh,
Yes.
open themselves to this?
Yes.
thank
Can
you,
I just
Allie.
can I just add a note? If you watch the Super Bowl halftime show, a Bad Bunny, Puerto Rican, there was a young minister that officiated a
Right. Yeah.
wedding. That young man is a young man that I mentored, Pastor Antonio Reyes. And so it talking about changing, and transforming to do the work of God. Yeah.
Oh, that's a fun little thing. Yeah. We'll have to go watch it again.
Yeah.
Probably most of us have seen it at least once and maybe more than that, but it's worth another watch. Thank you for that. Shavon, do you have a response to the tough choices? And then I'm going to toss the mic to Melissa for a moment.
For me, it's enforcing the rules. There's a reason I didn't
Mm,
do too well as a teacher. Um, but for me, my biggest rule is no bigotry of any kind. And
mm.
occasionally I get people who kind of want to slide comments in there, like, but I'm just voicing my opinion. I'm like, no, 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 no. I need to protect my chat, especially since, like I said, a lot of them have been damaged by the church and are rejected by society. So my desire to protect them is greater than my desire for your free speech. So that is a bannable offense. I don't mess around with that kind of stuff. And there are other places where people can go to say those kind of things. It's just not here.
Yeah.
So I want my space to continue to be inclusive and sustainable. And because I'm willing to lay down the law as far as that is concerned, that's what makes that happen. So,
All right. Non-negotiable.
mhm.
All right. Melissa, do you have a question for us from the chat?
Yeah, Alan asked, is the work of shaping holy space in the same in online environments as in physical environments in or outside the church? And so it's more a question for Shavon, but for
That's
anyone is
right.
obviously free to answer.
I would say yes. I look at the work that my colleagues are doing. You have to lay a foundation for that space. You have to give guidelines. You have to maintain it regularly. It's a lot of the same type of work. The only difference is that I'm standing in a kitchen over a stove, you know, um, making mofongo, you know, as opposed to standing outside of
Love you, Siobhan. Come on now.
my husband's better at it, but still. But yeah, it's the same type of work, it's the same type of effort. The environment is the only thing that's really different.
I love that.
And
So, okay,
I
go
just
ahead,
want to
Allie.
expand upon that a little bit, because and I'm thinking especially during COVID times when things had to be virtual for many and not for all, but in the work of being out in the community, what did that look like? And with the recognition that those who could be out in the community could be doing a certain manifestation of that work, but there always had to be a way to include those who could only participate virtually so that they could be equally benefit from, equally contribute to the work. And so while I would say virtual and in-person manifestations of the work may differ, the need to ensure the meaningfulness and the importance, the essentialness of different ways of showing up so that everyone can participate as they're able.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for that. So we do have just a very straightforward, I hope a very straightforward question about where people might hear Rogelio's sermons. Rogelio, are you on YouTube or something like that so that we can
I
tell
know that
people?
I know that they record me, and I will have to ask. I don't go into it,
Okay.
but I'll ask my congregation
All
what's
right.
going on, what's happening, and I'll send that to you.
Okay, very good. Well, we had a comment in the chat from one of our very active alums in the community who says he loves Bad Bunny and where can he listen to Rogelio preach? So thank
Yes.
you for that. And if we find it, so now whenever we do these panel discussions, and I've already talked with these three, we always want to end with some words of hope. And we had a question that we kind of had planned for that, but Dr. Brenneman has dropped a question in the chat that I believe can be that question about hope. And so I am going to pose it to you, and I would like each of you to take the time. We have time for each of you to answer. And that will be our final question and our words of hope. So as you're thinking about what you might say, remember this is what we're leaving folks with tonight, okay? So here's the question. Do you have spiritual or contemplative practices to expand sanctuary for your souls and keep you, from burnout? So we'll just pause here for just a minute as you think about that. Because we definitely want people to leave here knowing that there are some ways they can nourish their souls, even as they are like the three of you, laboring in their communities and in their churches alongside others, being present to people, to create sanctuary spaces, whether they're physical or virtual. And so let's offer them something to take away. As you are ready to respond, I invite you to share those practices with us and how you nourish your own soul for this work.
I,
That's a,
oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. That's a great question. I'll be very brief. I remember Dr. Nancy Hall. She taught a class there at ABSW BST, and it was on contemplative reflection, meditation. After I finished at ABSW, I was thrown into regional leadership and national leadership. And I thought that traveling 6 out of 7 days a week throughout the country, thought that was the work of God. And to some respect, it is. But I think where I made the mistake was not taking that time for myself, caring for my soul, caring for my family. And so now I have um, a discipline. I get up in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'll go run 2 miles, get ready for work. And in the evening, I'll go run another 2 miles. And that time is for me. It's taking care of the temple. And then it's also allowing me a chance to talk to God and getting rid of some of those chemicals in the system that can cause us to spiral. And it gives me a chance to kind of really reflect. And I think that it's important, taking care of the soul, taking care of those that you love and that love you the most. Because at the end of the day, when you give your last breath, it's not going to be the thousands of people that you preach to. It's going to be that immediate family that has loved and covered you for all those years.
Thank you.
So for me, there are three things that I do. One, I place limits on my media consumption. So I try to watch a limited amount of things that have to do with what's going on in the world, whether it's YouTube, TikTok, whatever. Two, I step in where I can to help lift others up. So whether it's in my chat or with my colleagues or things like that, I try to lift their spirits if I feel that they are starting to get a little weighed down with everything that's going on. That helps me too, because it lifts my own spirits by reminding me of what's, the other good things that are happening in the world. And three, I like to make this my motto: snatch your joy where you can find it. So for Dr. Rogelio, it's going on those runs. For me, it can be something as simple as, opening my curtain and realize we have a sunny day today and it's 72 degrees outside. My husband likes to joke that while he's off watching things like, Drugs Inc., I'm sitting down to an episode of Gem and the Holograms. So it can be the little things that help you find that joy, that good thing that's happening in your life, and that can sustain you just a little bit longer. So,
Thank you. Allie, spiritual practices that sustain you.
Well, because my work is with an interfaith community, being out in the streets is extremely empowering. And we are singing and we are praying and we are hearing testimony. And at one point, I realized this is my church. This is where I come to get restored. But then I also want to recognize that especially if I'm in the streets in a way that is potentially arrestable, or in a way where tear gas canisters might start flying, that I really need to give myself space afterward to sit with it and to use my words to say how it's affecting me and what God is calling me to learn from that experience. So having that space for journaling or reflecting, especially after a very intense encounter, or just being with someone who's weeping because their child is about to be deported. You can be there, and then that really affects you, and you need to give yourself space for that. And then I also twice a week I go on a multi-hour hike in the redwoods, and there's something about, again, that exercising the toxins, having a good friend to share your soul with, and taking in nature. Those those are things that I turn to regularly.
Beautiful. Friends, we've heard from three very different ministers with diverse ministries who care for themselves and others in a variety of ways, and it has been a gift. Thank you, Rogelio. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Shavon. We're so proud of all of our alum, and it's just delightful to learn from you and to spend time with you. I'm going to toss the microphone to Melissa, who has a few closing announcements before we tell you good night.